All right, today we're going to be getting into our pressing and our pulling. While this may seem like it's a big upper body day, we're going to talk about how pressing and pulling will actually be using our entire body. So we'll be talking about using our core, our lower body. We're going to be talking points of performance. We're also going to talk proper modifications. Now, before we get started, let's warm up. All right, for our upper body warm-up today, we're going to start with 30 seconds of each movement. It'll start with nice and easy arm circles forward. You can make them big or small. We'll then reverse, arm circles backwards, again big or small. We're going to go hugs. We're going to go up and back, touch at the top, touch in the back. We're going to go one up, one down. Remember, it's 30 seconds of each one of those. Then we're going to go 1 minute of jumping jacks. Let's get warm. All right, now we're going to talk about our perfect push-up. Remember, with the push-up, while it may seem like it's only upper body, like we talked about before, we're going to be talking about our entire body here. First things first, I'm going to demo some push-ups, then we're going to talk about what's going on. First things first, we're going to talk about our hand placement. Hand placement for the push-up is going to be right outside of your shoulders, palms flat on the ground. We actually think about spreading the floor as well. So again, we're going to talk about hand placement. Hands come down, right outside the shoulders. After hand placement, we want to talk about our elbows. We want our elbows tracking back and not out to the side like this. When my elbows track back, watch my shoulder here, it turns into this external rotated position, which is what we want whenever we press. You can see that I get into this nice pressing movement here, whereas if my elbows are flaring out to the side, my shoulder rolls in like this. Nobody really gets a lot of power pressing like this. So now we have hands and elbows tracking back. Now that we have hands, we have elbows, the next thing we're going to talk about is our core. When we're doing our perfect push-up, we want to stay in a rigid plank position. That means I'm keeping my core tight, squeezing my glutes, squeezing my quads. I don't want to have any sag in my hips, so I'll show you a couple good reps and then a couple reps where my hips sag. Notice that I stay in that strong plank position the whole time. Now, if I relax, we can see that my thighs touch at the bottom, which we don't want to have happen. So we have hands, elbows, core, and now we're going to talk about full range of motion. What full range of motion means is that if you're able to lock out your elbows, we need to lock our elbows every time and bring our chest to the ground every time as well. So again, here's a couple good reps focusing on all 4 points of performance. Hands, elbows, core, full range of motion. Now let's talk about modifying the push-up. Now, we've already talked about our perfect push-up. Remember, our 4 points of performance were hands, elbows, core, and full range of motion. Now, the wonderful thing about modifying the push-up is those 4 points of performance will remain true. We're just going to use an elevated surface. Now, today we're going to use a bench, but you could use a box or bleachers, and that would work just as well. Now, we're going to come down to our bench. We're going to go hands, elbows, core, full range of motion, every rep. Now, for you all, you're all going to start on an elevated surface. You're going to break up into groups and go for 4 sets of 5 reps. Go get it. Now we're going to get into our inverted row. Now today we're going to be using a TRX, but if you have rings or a barbell, whatever you can pull on will work totally fine. The really nice thing about going over the row after we've talked about the push-up is your points of performance are almost exactly the same. So let's start with hand placement. We're going to start with our hands right outside the shoulders. I'm going to press down and pull in. Now, the reason for pressing down first is by pressing first, I'm using my lats. As I rotate, I then use my biceps. So, hand placement first, elbows are second. Elbows are tracking back, never out to the side. That's our second point of performance. Our third will be keeping our core nice and tight. You'll notice that when I get into the bottom position of my row, I'm keeping everything nice and tight, not letting myself go loose in the bottom. So again, here's a couple good reps. Everything nice and tight. If I was to relax, I'd have the hips sag and the hips come back up. Our fourth point of performance here is going to be full range of motion, making sure that my arm starts fully extended, I pull to my chest, and then back to that fully extended position. Here's a couple more good rows. When modifying the row, it's going to be based off of our foot placement. When you're newer to this movement, you're going to want to take a bigger step back. Now, by taking this big step back, I'm not going to have as much of my body weight to pull up. We can see that the further I am away, the easier it will be for me to perform the movement. Now, as I bring my feet in, I'm now required to pull more of my body weight up. So we can see now, feet a little bit closer to underneath the rings, make it more difficult. And if I was to slide further, almost my entire body weight is being used to pull myself to the rings. So when you start further away, and as you become more comfortable and stronger, move yourself closer to underneath the rings. What we're going to do right now is we're going to break up into groups and do 5 sets of 5 reps. Go get it. We're now going to get into our butterfly sit-up. It will start coming down to the ground and touching your feet together. From here, I'll show you a couple good reps and we'll talk some standards. Notice, in the back, my shoulders touch, and in the front, my shoulders are either stacked over the hip or slightly in front. I like to touch my toes every time. Here's a couple more good reps. Now, what you're going to do is break up into groups and do 2 sets of 5 reps. Go get it. All right, we've made it to our first ever AMRAP. What an AMRAP means is as many rounds or reps as possible. Today, we'll be doing an AMRAP 8. So again, as many rounds or reps as possible in 8 minutes. We're going to be working our way through 3 movements today. We'll be doing 60 jumping jacks, 10 perfect push-ups, and 10 butterfly sit-ups. I'm going to talk about the movements, we're going to talk about modifications, points of performance, and then a little bit of strategy. For our jumping jacks, we just want them to look like this. Every time your hands touch overhead, it will count as 1 rep. From there, our perfect push-up, we're all going to be using an elevated surface today. The reason is we care about the 4 points of performance and not how many rounds or reps you can get done. So remember, for our push-ups, it's going to be hands outside the shoulders, elbows tracking back, strong core, full range of motion. Here's a couple good reps. Now, as you go through these reps today, don't worry about always having to do 10 reps unbroken. If you break them up, that's totally fine. Remember, 4 points of performance is what we care about. After you're done with those 10 push-ups, you'll come down to the ground for 10 butterfly sit-ups, making sure your shoulders touch in the back. And in the front, shoulders are either stacked over the hips or slightly in front, reaching for those toes. You'll be going through those 3 movements, 60 jumping jacks, 10 perfect push-ups, and 10 butterfly sit-ups as many times as possible in 8 minutes. Remember, what we care about today is the way that you move, not how many reps and rounds you complete. Overall, make sure that you have a great time. We'll see you soon. Congratulations on finishing your first AMRAP. Today we introduced pressing and pulling. And remember, overall what we care about is you understanding the building blocks that we're going through right now, which are the elevated push-up and the inverted row. Yes, down the road we certainly want to be doing push-ups to the ground and strict pull-ups, but we first have to master the elevated push-up, the inverted row before we can get there. Remember, focus on the points of performance. Have a great time. Awesome job on today's AMRAP.